Hello and welcome, Ducks fans. Where and whenever you are watching or listening, this is the OnceADuck podcast, where we bring you up to date with current and former University of Oregon athletes and give you never before heard stories about your favorite teams and moments in Duck history. I'm Nick Cody, former offensive lineman. You can find me on Twitter at JustFollow61. Following my lead block and taking it to the end zone, as always, is my co-host, Sam Tidrick Schmidt. You can reach him at Samuel101TS. Sam, I know you're excited, but with the Stanford game just over 24 hours away, can you believe it's finally here?
Nick, I cannot believe that we are finally at this point after months of waiting, after so much time sitting back, watching college football, excited to see some Pac-12 play. It's finally here. You've got your nightmare green jersey on. That means it's time to rock and roll. I've got a little throwback on that I'm rocking just for our special guest today. It's going to be a really fun episode. I'm so excited. People, if you want to, go back, listen to our last episode titled We're Back. It's available anywhere you get your podcasts: YouTube, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud. Follow at OnceADuck, like, share, subscribe, do all of the above. It helps us so that we can bring more content to all of you.
Yeah, and we want to thank our audience as always for reaching out, being interactive on Twitter. They were very quick to guess who our guest was going to be for this very special Stanford episode, and for that we went out and reached into our pocketbooks here at the budget, and we handed at ScoDucks58 a $25 Nike gift card for his guess of Rob Beard. So thank you for participating, and you guys got to pay attention on Twitter and be quick, because our fans are very quick to guess who our guests are, who we're paying attention to, and who we're going to have on the show. So you got to make sure you're ready for it.
Man, and I'm so glad that we got the kind of fans that can figure that out, because I just know that means they're going to be excited for every interview, excited for every episode. Episodes coming out every day before game day, I should say, moving throughout the season afterwards. I know it's going to be a really fun ride. It's going to be a great time. Nick, I know you've got a little something prepared to start our episode today. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, going back to our 2011 life manual, another reference from here, our quote of the day for this episode: what is the difference between an obstacle and an opportunity? Our attitude towards it. Every opportunity has a difficulty, and every difficulty has an opportunity. And I think this is very fitting for Stanford, because over the years, particularly in the time I was at Oregon, Stanford has long become sort of a rival with Oregon, not just in terms of on the football field, but stylistically, in terms of the way these teams are being built. And you could see now that Mario Cristobal has come in and really wanted to insert a toughness that Stanford once seemed to kind of promote in terms of their own program, and something that I even got to see Jim Harbaugh try and build through the recruiting process.
Man, that makes so much sense, and that's going to be so fun to get into and talk about. Speaking of that recruiting process, I know that you have a little bit of experience with it. Before we dive into the X's and O's, before we dive into the all times, before we dive into this game versus that game, this year versus that year, why don't you break down that recruiting process just a little bit?
Well, I know a lot of people out there, especially on Twitter, like to jab at Oregon fans about the education. But I would like to make it clear at this very moment that I was an official Oregon scholar baller. And I did actually get recruited a ton by Stanford, and they were in my top 3 when I finally decided on the Oregon Ducks. Unfortunately for me, I did not take them all that seriously, because I even got some of their recruiting letters mixed up with Harvard, as you can see there.
Ooh, scholarly guy.
Well, I honestly didn't know football as well as I probably should have as a high schooler in 2007 and a junior. I had a lot going on, but getting recruiting letters, and didn't know necessarily that they were even in different conferences. So that goes to tell you kind of where Stanford football was at the time in 2007. They were not even yet to be on the rise, really. But then we get into the letters from Harbaugh, and this is a guy I will never forget, because I went down for a Nike camp, and it was 2007 or 2006, some year like that. But I remember seeing some freaks there, some guys that are playing there. Tyron Smith was the offensive lineman that just wowed me. I remember seeing that guy and just thinking, that is a cut above. That's why he's a 5-star. I'm a 4-star. I remember thinking that, having that moment in the back of my head, and trying to shut all that out and perform, because camp is running. Pete Carroll's there, throwing footballs. I believe he got, after that, some kind of a warning that might be a violation, is throwing footballs with recruits and stuff. So he had to tone that down. But I just remember it very vividly, and it was on Stanford's campus. And then they had that coincide with a recruiting visit, which I got to meet for the very first time one Mr. Willie Taggart, who was the running backs coach at the time. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. You hopefully were buckled up for that one to veer left there. But anyways, he I didn't get to talk to him much. He just introduced himself, shook my hand. He was the running back coach at the time, so not a whole lot of interaction, but he definitely, they want offensive line guys. So, and everybody there was kind of pitched in and recruiting on me. So that was a very interesting time. Some of the stuff that, even going back and reading here, I got one letter that was sent in April and one letter that was sent in the fall as they're going through fall camp. But you can tell through a lot of these things now, while I'm not the biggest Harbaugh fan, or even, Taggart in terms of their execution on the field or their style of play, one thing I do like is the way they do try and reinforce a standard of toughness. And even in these recruiting letters, you can hear Harbaugh: "Since my arrival at Stanford, I've seen our team make a transformation that is exciting. Our players are buying into the goals of the program, and it shows in every position meeting, conditioning, workout, and practice session. On the field, tempo, focus, and competitive nature of our team is tremendous. What we need to complete the transformation is players like you. We want dedicated, tough-minded athletes who love the game of football. We're looking for young men that have the work ethic to succeed at the highest level and the passion for the game that separates one individual from the next." Who's that sound a lot like to you, Sam?
Oh man, that sounds a whole lot like some people that I think have been here around Eugene recently.
Yeah, and you can definitely hear a lot of the coaching tree there with Willie Taggart, and even some of the things that Mario Cristobal talks about, a lot of the culture of this program moving forward. So that's something that, going back and trying to kind of refamiliarize myself with that process, I just remembered thinking, wow, that's one thing I remember really reminded me. Now, here's where they really seem to differentiate to me, because when I shook Mario Cristobal's hand on an Oregon spring game alumni kind of event, looked into his eyes, and he started talking football right away with just a passion and an energy that, like Rob Mosley talked about in our last episode, you can see it just transcends throughout the program. The problem with, in terms of kind of, well, even not just Harbaugh, but even Willie Taggart, I didn't have the buy-in personally. And that's one of the things that didn't sell me on Stanford, because I remember right after, their event and having that camp, they took us on the newly built stadium, or newly renovated. And right up above the scoreboard, there's a little plateau area with some grass, and they had a little barbecue there. And I just remember Harbaugh coming up and trying to strike conversation. And, my mom, who's on the trip with me, is kind of, falling for that kind of coaching charm that you hear from a lot of coaches. And then he wanted to talk to me about the steak sandwiches. And I just remember being like, I know I'm a lineman, and I know we're just a bunch of fat dudes, but man, if you're going to pitch me going to Stanford, and, it's the summertime, so the campus is completely empty and it looks more like you're walking around a cathedral than a campus. So for me, I just wasn't feeling at home at all. And then, coach isn't talking to me about, football or your career. He's coming up, I'm Jim Harbaugh, and how about those steak sandwiches? Aren't those great? I'll get you going in the morning. And it's like, all right. Yep. It wasn't for me. I like people that were very direct, and, that was more the Bilotti tempo, and eventually, Chip, the most direct. But anyways, just taking it back a little bit, and a reminder for everyone that Scholar Ballers exist at Oregon too, baby.
Scholar Ballers exist at Oregon too. Oregon and Stanford, well, Nick, they've been playing for an awful long time. I don't know if you know that. Do you know the first time these two teams were able to meet each other was?
No, Sam, you're going to have to hit me with that and all the stats I know you've prepared for this very special episode.
Oh, well, that would be the year 1900. These two teams faced off. It was a 34-0 Stanford shellacking of the Webfoots at the time. But since then, it's been a pretty great rivalry. Both teams have been able to go back and forth quite a bit. Stanford definitely dominated the early years, but Oregon's recently, starting in about the Rich Brooks era, has been able to put in some work against the Stanford Cardinal.
Yeah, and it's been crazy to see the transition of that program and the ups and downs of relevancy. It's like, particularly in my time, because to see them rise to the top of the Pac-12 and be right there in contention with Oregon for so many years, kind of back and forth trading off that, it was just amazing. Because I remember growing up as a kid, you saw that Stanford USC game that everyone talks about, where everyone just think, how could, like, however many consecutive games or whatever it was, like, Stanford was just a kind of a lowly team, and like, not like, their games weren't even televised against Oregon. I remember even as a recruit, it was really hard to try and find those games on TV. It's like, well, they wanted to hide that away. It was even harder than trying to find some on the Pac-12 network, Sam.
Oh man, that's tricky, especially if you're some unlucky fans out there. That's definitely not an easy task to achieve. What I will say is that probably the majority of these games all time weren't televised. The majority of these Stanford wins, I have a hard time thinking were on TV, unless you were maybe able to have a local channel somewhere around here in Eugene or down there in the Bay Area. Stanford all time, they lead this rivalry 49 wins to 33 for Oregon. There was a tie in there all the way back in the early 1900s. But recently, Oregon's been playing a whole lot better. They had a string of wins from 2002 to 2008 before the 2009 game that I know we'll talk a little bit more about here coming up. But the Ducks have definitely done their part to make this a much more interesting rivalry. And I think the games that we're going to break down are going to be a good example of that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we can take away from all this history is none of it really means anything going into this season. Unfortunately, who knows the way this game could play out? It's a season opener, and you like to think that a lot of these storylines and stylistically, they might give you some idea of how the game's going to play out. But as we've already seen with the Oregon depth chart, there's already at least 19 positions that we don't know for certain what we'll see starting out there on the lineup, because we have so many oars on the organizational chart.
I mean, the organizational chart, you just mentioned it. There are so many oars. I want to ask you, as somebody who's been in these training camps, someone who's been around this type of, I don't want to say uncertainty, but these type of competitions going into a season, how much do you put into an organizational chart like this? How much do you really look this up and down as something set in stone versus just kind of an idea of who we're going to be able to see out on the field come Saturday?
Well, there's two different ways you can look at it, and there's the internal and external perception. If you're within the team, if you're within that building right now, you have to look at that as a tier. You have to look at that as, hopefully you've earned the respect of the coaches to be put out there in a public way in one of those starting roles, or or even a backup position. Like, all of those things should be not just something you go and pin on your chest, but a standard you hold yourself to of excellence, knowing that, like I know as well as anyone, that the fierce competition that comes in at Oregon, anything could happen and someone could take your spot. So I think that's a very important thing, is that there is some recognition of that, but not letting that get to your head as a player, and having that be something that you're not entitled to, but you are excited to go out and earn every single day you're on the field, not just game day, but in practices. I think that's really important. Externally, I think the biggest thing is it's a headache for Stanford. They have to go, and obviously with the quarterback situation, a great example. They have to go back and look at not only tape on Shuck, but they have to look at Brown too, and go look at Boston College tape to see if this is really an or. We have to at least spend this much time in our defensive meetings and that much time in our defensive practices trying to understand Oregon could come out with this quarterback or this quarterback, and who really knows?
Do you believe that it is a strategy by the coaching staff to force Stanford to have to look at more tape, to look at more possibilities of what they could be facing?
It could be, I mean, even going into the season, if you feel comfortable with two quarterbacks, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. There aren't going to be enough games for this to be a long, heated controversy. If you have a team that has complete buy-in and you really look at those guys as competitive football players, and you look at this season already, Trevor Lawrence is already missing, already not one game, probably going to be 2 games, going to miss Notre Dame too, I believe too, right? So who knows? You have to believe. I think this year it's an advantage to believe that you have 2 guys that could go out there and start for you.
Well, I can tell you a couple of places where there definitely aren't any oars for the Oregon Ducks. The running back and receiver positions, sure, maybe a little bit further down the depth chart, you might get some of that, but we know the starters. CJ Verdell, he's going to be the feature back. We'll see a lot of Dye and Habibu Likio as well, but we know that CJ Verdell is going to be the man. As well as at wide receiver, Pittman, Red, Johnny Johnson III. We kind of have an idea that those are going to be the guys who are going to be getting a whole lot of snaps. Maybe you get some Devin Williams in there too, some Josh Delgado, a little bit of Chris Hudson or Brian Addison as well. But we know for the most part who is going to be the skill guys for the Ducks this upcoming season. My biggest question is, can Oregon safely and appropriately get them the ball to where they're supposed to?
Well, and I'm really excited to see that with Coach Moore's offense coming in. We obviously, if you've watched any UNLV this year, you can, and the Chargers games to compare, you can see that maybe Oregon last year wasn't utilizing Herbert as much as we should. And I think going into the conference championship game and the Rose Bowl, we said those things. And it was very clear that we were really trying to force the inside run game. And at times, we were falling into a bit of predictability. So I think the biggest thing is we're going to see within the first couple of drives right away, how good is our execution? And I think more importantly than even, getting the football to those guys and how creative the offense is, I think the more important thing to look for in tomorrow's game is to try and look for how disciplined is the team. Those things are going to carry over more in this season than anything of learning any concepts of route trees, protections, understanding blitzes. The biggest thing this year is going to be able to be calm, protect the football, and be on the same page with your teammates, because it's going to be a crazy year. That's the only thing we can predict, is that, week to week, who knows what could happen. We've only got a limited sample of games that you can go out and nationally show the world why Oregon football deserves to be up there with the top schools in the nation. So I think we'll get the playmakers the ball. I think the more important thing is, once they get it, do they take care of it? And I think if they do, they'll get it to the end zone. And I think with the defense we have, looking over at that defensive side, those front 7 guys are pretty tough, and even their backups right now. You look at that, obviously at the defensive end, or when they're in that nickel, that Sam position, Kayvon Thibodeau's got that locked down. Jordan Scott, our big man, switching to the number 3 on the inside. I think all the offense has to really do is just take care of the ball, because our defense is going to get after people.
You read my mind, Nick. I was going to go to the defense next. I want to look at the secondary. I know we talked with Rob Mosley about it. He broke it down phenomenally for us. Looking at it right here, there aren't a whole lot of oars here either. Jamal Hill will be the nickel. Then you got Mikhail Wright, Diamador Lenore as your corners, Nick Pickett, Verone McKinley as your safeties. How do you feel that unit, losing a couple of guys, but with some very experienced people stepping up into the roles, how do you see that group faring this coming week, as well as a little bit further down the line?
Yeah, I think Duck fans were all pretty nervous, especially, when that last domino of Holland kind of fell, which we all were expecting. But getting Lenore back and looking at this definitely has to make you feel a lot better. Verone McKinley being at that field safety position, I'm excited to see him. He's electrifying when he gets the football in his hands. And, obviously we won't be able to probably utilize him as much in the return game now, but got to hope he's got to have, a couple interceptions this season that, will be hopefully just as electrifying as it returns. So there's a lot of potential here. Oregon has really kind of restored themselves at the defensive back position after a little bit of kind of a short hiatus, a lull there, where it felt like we were forced to play young guys very early, particularly 2017. I remember when Diamador was getting thrown out there, and it felt very like, whoa, we didn't recruit for this year or something, because when you throw a freshman defensive back out there in the Pac-12, that's dangerous with his, especially, at the time, Mike Leach in the conference, that's a tough ask of a freshman. So to know someone with that kind of experience coming out and leading this group as a senior, I mean, that's got to make you feel a lot better.
Nick, I want to take a second and look at maybe one of our favorite things to look at on the show. Let's go to some special teams really quick. This is something we always have a lot of fun with. Camden Lewis seems to have locked down both the place kicker and kickoff positions. Tom Snead punting. Kick return, I think, will be very interesting. Mikhail Wright is right here as the lead returner. Is this something that you ever are concerned about, having somebody who is so important to one side of the ball or the other also out there on special teams, especially somebody who's going to be returning kickoffs day in and day out, play in and play out?
Well, Oregon has a history of great special teams players, not just being great on special teams, but going on, and that's where you really made your mark and showed that you could be reliable on our defense. And in some cases our offense, but more particularly, I remember a lot of guys coming up, especially my era, that made their mark on kickoff or punt return, or going out there and laying out a nasty blocking kick return. Just there were guys that when given the opportunity in those special teams really shined. And then you saw that once they were starters and stars, like a guy like Patrick Chung was still out there diving for every kick, on every punt or field goal. And that's just kind of an attitude you have to have. In fact, one of the things when I was digging around is every time we'd go into a game under Coach Kelly, we had these laminated sheets that had 5 keys of the game. The offense had 5 keys to offense, and the special teams defense had theirs in the special teams. And the special teams, the goals for Stanford were 1, score a touchdown on kickoff return, punt, etc. I don't know if Coach Oz wanted to score on all of those. I think ideally he would. I think he meant one of those, but the number 2 here just completely, it represents all our special teams. Compete every single special teams play as if your job or role will be the difference in us winning the game. Number 3, empty your tank. Play so hard, so physical, so energetic, and with so much passion that you have nothing left at the end of the game. 4, passionately cover every kickoff and punt. Kickoff tackles inside the 20. Punt team, do not allow 1 single yard. 5, no penalties, play smart, control your emotions. And I think all of those are going to be great things that you're going to see embodied by our guest today, Rob Beard, and are really fundamentals of the special teams game at Oregon that I still see carried over today.
I have no doubt that that is still carried over to this day. Just to finish going down the list, maybe for the people who just haven't heard yet or want to hear from us, punt return, this is a whole lot of oars. Travis Dye or Micah Pittman or Chris Hudson or Josh Delgado, any one of those guys you could see out there, all just speed demons. Your long snapper, Karsten Battles, and Tom Snead as the holder. Another punter as a holder. I know that's something that's pretty traditional through the years at Oregon. Now I want to get into the Stanford Cardinal team a little bit. This is a team that I know you've looked at a little bit. You've dug into their roster a bit, their depth chart a little bit. This is a team that experienced a whole lot of people who bounced from the program this past summer, a whole lot of people who transferred out. KJ Costello, just one example. He left, went to Mississippi State. Go in depth a little bit, if you will, on this Stanford Cardinal team. Who are the guys that are going to be lining up against the Ducks come Saturday?
So here's the biggest thing is that we really, again, going into this, rosters are going to be so week to week. And what we do know is that they're returning their quarterback from last year, who came in place of Costello, and I believe was actually able to lead them in the game with Wazoo to what was a passing record for a single game over, I believe it was 509 yards. But you're dealing with something there that obviously there's plenty of arm talent. This guy is a 5-star quarterback. I just think the biggest thing is that he's been compared to a lot of guys that they don't remind me of Andrew. He doesn't remind me of Andrew Luck. I remember seeing a couple of his games last year and particularly Stanford in general, and thinking this was such a discombobulated Stanford team compared to what we're usually seeing on the field. They weren't quite as disciplined, and I think even bigger than the rosters itself, because as we've talked about, they've been one of the most depleted teams due to the transfer portal. I think the biggest thing is going to be getting after that quarterback, because if he has anything near a 500-yard day, that's a bad way to start our year off.
Nick, I personally have a hard time seeing that happening, especially with the talent that Oregon has in the secondary. This Stanford team, they're going to do, I think, what Stanford teams do, though. They want to assert the run. They want to dominate in the trenches. No matter who leaves, no matter who comes in, David Shaw is still going to recruit those tough guys who are going to put in work in the trenches. I think that's exactly what Oregon can expect from Stanford. But this year, as well as last year, as we saw in what was a 21-6, excuse me, beat down on the farm, Oregon now has the bodies that they can play that kind of game.
Yeah, not only do they have the physical type of bodies to match up way better than we did back in my day, but I believe they also have the systems in place and the experience to really beat Stanford at what traditionally has been their own game. Davis Mills is going to have at least, semi-solid protection. Stanford is always really good at picking up blitzes. They're able to kind of see disguises pretty well. But how does he respond once he gets hit a couple times? Because you only have, I know Stanford tries to put 7 or 8 of them out there, but you only have so many offensive linemen. And if you have good enough coverage, eventually somebody's bound to get there. So what I'm really interested in seeing in the first game, particularly in Stadium, is how different is it going to be when that quarterback gets hit? Because as you and I both know, when Autzen is rocking and everything is going nuts, particularly against Stanford, you can barely hear it. And even those really disciplined, smart offensive linemen Stanford has, those guys will jump once in a while, and we're not really going to have that luxury this year.
No fans in the stands means that they're going to be playing in Eugene, but the home field advantage maybe a little bit less than what you would expect. Still, Stanford is going to be coming in, playing on turf. They're used to that grass field. That is at least a little something in Oregon's favor. Nick, before we move on to doing one of our favorite things here, and that's talking about past games, why don't you give us what you think the keys to the game are for the Ducks? What is Oregon going to have to do Saturday under the lights on ABC in order to secure a victory?
Number one, I'm going to say, is take care of the football. I think every game I've ever played against Stanford, that's been the key to the game. Is the team, I believe every game I've played in that was with them, that whoever won the turnover battle won. And as we saw, particularly in 2018, even when you come out and have a really solid game plan, if you don't take care of the football, things can end really badly for you really quickly. So the number one key is to take care of the football. Number two is defensively get aligned. Don't let Stanford try and trick you with their personnel swaps and trying to induce something to get you to make a mistake. The biggest thing with playing Stanford from a defensive standpoint is trying to understand that they're trying to isolate some kind of a matchup, whether that be in the running game or in the passing game, and they're going to try and exploit it. And they're going to be very blunt about it. And then once you load up and try and stop that one thing, that uppercut is going to come from, either the passing game or counter it with the running game. So the biggest thing is to make sure your alignment and assignment is correct on defense so that you're in position to make a tackle. Maybe it's not going to stop a first down, but maybe you stop a big play from happening, going for a touchdown or putting them in scoring position. So alignment and assignment, just making sure you know your defensive assignment and where to line up, because especially with the little limited preparation time, I think that's going to be a big factor for a lot of teams this season. We've already seen in college football a lot of high scoring games just because defensive guys are out there really confused, particularly when the tempo gets stepped up. Number three, I think the biggest thing is just developing a rhythm and a tempo with this season without any fans in the crowd, and any fans in the stands. Now, even though our cutouts will be there to cheer them on, it's not going to be as loud. It's going to be a whole lot different, no band, or, we'll see what it ends up actually being like. But I just remember that was such a big factor for me as a player, is even on days where I wasn't feeling great, where I was injured or I wasn't starting, I was so hyped up to play in Autzen Stadium in front of all those fans. So the third key for me is this team's got to bring its own energy and got to find a rhythm this season early. And if they can get out with a couple scoring drives and some lockdown defensive drives on the first couple series, I really look forward to them just taking this whole season and running with it.
Well, Nick, we've taken a ton of time to talk about everything current, everything that needs to be said going into the game this weekend. Now, let's just start working our way backwards a little bit. Oregon and Stanford, especially the last 12 years or so, have had some really good matchups. Last year's game was probably one of the more lopsided affairs. It was a 21-6 victory for Oregon. Justin Herbert absolutely balled out, as we know him to do. Played a great game. Jacob Breland, 2 touchdowns in that one. Another great effort from him. Oregon was able to get some payback for what happened in 2018. We all remember what happened then. College game day came to Eugene. It was a huge deal. I know I didn't sleep for probably about 36 hours straight. It was a great time, even though 5-hour energy was dragging me through it. Awesome experience. Oregon doesn't get the win, though. You mentioned it a little bit. They got on top early. They were doing a really good job, but it kind of fell apart down the stretch. Didn't work out so well. Given those 2 years in a row, the heartbreak and then the redemption, what do you think it said about Oregon as they evolved from one year to another? And what does it mean for a program to be able to get a big win like that over an opponent that gave them such a heartbreaking loss the season before?
Well, I think particularly when you lose in the fashion that you did in 2018, you have a lot of teachable moments in that game where, those kinds of heartbreaking losses and comebacks from other teams that you let happen, that you could have done something differently. And those things can either break you down or they can stick with you and help you build better every single time that you even think about that situation. And I think particularly with the pile on play and the fumbling at the end of the game, even in terms of play calling, I think everybody that was involved in that game can go back and learn something from that. I know personally I was there for that game, and I think a great analogy is I had a buddy in town, and it was his first Duck game. And I wanted to take him out, show him, we saw the crowds for game day on campus. Everybody was so excited. And I wanted to show him the 2 sides of Oregon right there on campus. And I took him for his first drink at Rennie's. And then I took him for a 4th quarter over at Taylor's, rest in peace. And that was a very good summary of that 2018 game, because we got to that 4th quarter and it felt disastrous. It felt like everything that could go wrong was going wrong, but you couldn't look away. So I think this year it's going to be really about coming out, setting the tone early, because even last year, even though it was 21-6 and on the scoreboard lopsided, it really didn't feel that way. It felt like our offense should have been clicking more. It felt like it was one of the first times I remember being like thinking our defense could be elite with the talent on the field. But yeah, I do think that it looked lopsided, but it was a lot closer game. It felt like watching it at home.
Oregon and Stanford, they played in 2016 and 17. I know we probably don't want to talk about those 2 games. The next game we're going to get into, though, 2015, the Vernon Adams game, where Oregon was able to get a victory when they probably weren't expected to get one. Probably not a lot of people predicted they would get one. A ton of big plays in this game. Taj Griffin down the sideline, a big 4th and 1 downfield chuck to Darren Carrington for a touchdown. And finally, a batted ball, I believe it was by Tyson Coleman, in the end zone to break up a play, secure Oregon's victory. That year was full of turmoil for the Ducks, but they were able to get a signature win there against Stanford.
Yeah, and I really wondered in the 2014, 2015 years if that was the prime or the peak of that rivalry, especially in the years to follow. I kind of wondered if we'd ever see that level of football again. But I remember just thinking, wow, you would have blown my mind if you would have told me as a recruit that by the time I'd be done playing, the 2 teams that would be really running and competing for the Pac-12 title would be Oregon and Stanford. And even not just, the Pac-12 title, but national title aspirations at that time. The Stanford Cardinal are a team that, because when you play that style of football, you can be in any game, with any football team. You can take the air out of the football, you can keep it away from the other team, and you can play bully ball. And when you can do that effectively, you can really establish yourself against any team. So it was really awesome during those years to see the 2 stylistic differences really take over, because again, Stanford just was able to grind out games and take Oregon completely out of their element sometimes. But the way Oregon was able to light up the scoreboard so quickly and just have so many guys filtering in on defense to try and keep guys fresh, it was always an epic matchup, especially those 2 games.
The 15 and 14 games, so much fun. 13 and 12, both absolute heartbreakers. In 13, it looked like Oregon might have enough to come back. Saw some crazy onside kick action, wasn't able to do it. 2012, that was senior night. Just walk us through a little bit of what that night was like from the first kickoff till the final kick in overtime.
Yeah, well, and for our special guest on the show, Rob Beard, it was his senior night too. And senior night in Autzen Stadium is really special. You get to have your family on the field, and I had my high school coach, and you get to shake your coach's hand and have that moment to really celebrate your career with your family. And every senior gets that opportunity. And even though that game didn't go the way we wanted, that's always really special and a special moment as a Duck for everyone. The thing I remember about that game personally is we had a rough week of practice. We were so hard on ourselves getting amped up for that game. There was so much on the line and so much pressure. And I think we bought in a little bit too much to the narratives going into the game of, excuse me, of having to try and out tough Stanford. And we ended up getting into a game where we ended up getting in way too close a battle with them, and a couple calls didn't go our way. I remember particularly the one that stands out to me and will never quite make sense in my mind is that Zach Ertz catch that upon further review, they gave the touchdown. But I mean, when you catch the football with the shoulder out of bounds, like on, not even questionably, like in the white area, I just remember that. And then the kick at the end, just that sunken moment of knowing your last game in Autzen Stadium is a loss. And we didn't have too many of those. I only had one as a starter, and that was to USC in a close game where we missed another kick. And those feeling to end my Autzen career on that was something that took a long time to get over, for sure.
Well, let's start talking about the better times a little bit. I'm going to reverse what we've been doing because we've been going backwards in time. I think that there was a 4-game stretch for Oregon that I think was very, very important from 2008 through 2011. So the 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 games, Oregon went 3-1 in those ball games. I believe one of the first beginnings of what Oregon was going to know as the future of the program occurred in that 2008 ball game. Jeremiah Masoli's at quarterback, Jeremiah Johnson, LeGarrette Blount at the running back position. Oregon actually, I believe, either goes down or it's tied with under 2 minutes to play, drive the field in record time, no timeouts used, the Chip Kelly offense flying. At this time, he's still the offensive coordinator. LeGarrette Blount rumbles into the end zone for a touchdown to finish out that ball game. 2-point conversion, also good, also LeGarrette Blount. This was to secure a win. Walk us through a little bit what you saw throughout that game, but more specifically, this final drive that ended up showing Duck fans what they could be expecting for the next few seasons to come.
Well, I think one of the biggest things I learned in my redshirt year is that when we were preparing for Stanford that week, we practiced like it was the most physical football we could have in our practices. I know our scout team guys were asked to just, even hit guys like a little bit extra, try and get up in their faces. And, I remember coming out of that week of practice just banged up and sore. Going in that game, I felt really confident, and particularly driving down at the end, I felt that embracing that kind of toughness on a drive is the best way to kind of encapsulate that you did have that preparation, that you were ready for something like that. And in that moment, even though I wasn't playing in the game as a red shirt on the sidelines, and that energy, you knew that Oregon was going to take that thing over.
2009, it's the game after Oregon is able to upset USC. Maybe a little bit of a hangover game because after 2 quarters at the half, Oregon finds themselves trailing the game 31-14. The rest of the way, y'all were able to outscore Stanford, but still they held on for the victory 51-42. But what I think this game did is this game cemented to Oregon and to y'all what had to be done the rest of the season. You didn't lose again until the Rose Bowl. You were able to play phenomenal football the rest of the way. Talk about what that loss meant a little bit and how it was used moving forward into the season.
Well, I know I mentioned it a little last week, but man, I got banged up that game, and I know I wasn't the only guy, but I really love to complain about it. PAT is something that every offensive lineman knows, or field goal block team, is a rigor on the body. You basically are trying to protect yourself and strike upwards in a single moment, and hoping that you can keep your guy stood up long enough that he can't block the kick or get through. Unfortunately, when you play Stanford, they usually try to pick the weakest guard and send 3 guys in his gap, or at least in my time. I don't know if they still do people like that, but I remember stepping into that game, I particularly because Jordan Holmes was a bit banged up, our center at the time. And I really thought, man, here's the thing we got to do. I got to just get down as close as I could to our long snapper and just hang on for dear life. And it did not work. I remember the first 2 or 3 times out on the field, I got buried. And so bad that when I got to the sideline, Coach Wood was chewing me out, telling me, I'm going to have to pull you if you honestly can't just hold up, because eventually someone's going to get through, jump over him and block. So I had to learn very quickly in that game to really try and strike the most inside guy and hope for the best, and hope that would hold you up against the other 2 guys trying to drive you back. And I know it was a rough day for me, a great day for Andrew Luck. I mean, he made it look easy. They set up the run game and the play action game perfect. And I remember, as I said in our last episode, that was really like his national coming out party, it felt like.
Speaking of national coming out parties, 2010. It's a game that we are going to dive much further in depth with our guest. But for now, let's just say it was a statement game. Everybody across the board played well. Darren Thomas, he was 20 for 29, over 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. LaMichael, 31 carries, 257 yards, 3 touchdowns. A crazy, fun ball game. Oregon went down early, down 21-3 after 1 quarter. But by the end of the ball game, 52-31 victory. As Duck fans know, LaMichael James, a huge run into the end zone in that 4th quarter with just over a minute remaining. That was a statement. LaMichael James, 76-yard run. Nick, this is pretty much as big a game as can happen. It's going to become across, especially as early in the season as it was in early October. What was the emotion going into this ball game, a ball game that everybody knew was going to be huge? And how, as that game progressed, starting slow, picking up speed, eventually racing to the finish line, beating Stanford. Just walk us through that entire day, that entire game.
I believe to steal a term that I think Harbaugh's used, we had a game plan that induced a lot of lethal simplicity, and to kind of counter Stanford and everything they were doing. And to be honest, the energy in that game was weird because they came out to an early lead, and it was feeling a bit like, uh-oh, guys, what are we doing? When are we going to turn it on? But when we did, man, it was crazy. So one of the things I love about that game in particular is a lot of people love to come out and act like Oregon had this crazy offense and we were doing all this complicated stuff. But again, a lot of those carries, particularly for LaMichael and on that big run, were one of our most simple base plays, which we at OnceADuck can show you live on video and we'll have on our podcasting platforms and on our WordPress, but essentially our basic inside zone play. It wasn't anything major or simple, but we kept just gashing them for large plays on the inside where our offensive line was simply just going through a basic zone blocking scheme, leaving the backside defensive end unblocked, who we'd use as our read guy. And as many of you know who are football fanatics, quarterback will just sit and watch the defensive end or whoever the read guy is and decide to either let the running back have the carry or pull the ball for himself to throw out to a receiver or run himself. So we had a lot of options based around those base plays, but they were very simple calls for the offensive line, basically letting us know a play in a direction. You saw that with that lethal simplicity, we were able to execute plays very quickly. And even before sometimes Stanford was set, particularly on that play in general, I think all our offensive linemen could just go position block, which is, for those of you that aren't familiar, where you go and just get and beat someone to a spot and just put your hands on him. You don't have to actually drive or push them anywhere because LaMichael was gone so fast on that run and just right up the middle that no one could touch him. And he was already gone, and everyone we had out of position just because of our alignment and assignment. I think that's another thing we're going to see this coming weekend, but was particularly key to that game in general. And, you know, another huge key to that game, we'll be talking a lot more with Rob, is the momentum change with the sudden unexpected onside kick. And as an offensive lineman, we had no clue. I just remember guys getting, an update from Coach Wood and then drawing up on the whiteboard after our last series. And you're just trying to figure out, what are we going to do next time we get the football? You're not really paying attention necessarily all the time during those kickoffs, but suddenly next thing we know, we have the football back and our offense is going back out there already before Coach Wood can even finish what he's coaching. So I think not only did we catch Stanford off guard, but we even caught ourselves a little bit off guard with that play.
And that is such an awesome play that I cannot wait to get into with Rob. It's going to be so much fun to break that down a little bit. Something I noticed that you spoke on was that read option that led to so many big plays by LaMichael James. This week, going back and rewatching the 2010 and 2011 games, I noticed a lot that Darren Thomas was actually taking those options a lot early in the games, both of them, and was definitely using it to work the Stanford players a little bit, if you will, just to get them a little bit more used to seeing him pull the ball in those scenarios. Then we're able to see later in the game when he does give it to LaMichael, boom, right up the middle, wide open lane to the end zone.
Well, and like I said, it's a great play because the standard design is very, very simple. Everything you can see is very base, but you can do so many little things off it by just having the quarterback pull and throw maybe a bubble or a smoke screen out to a receiver, or putting an extra back into the game and giving a pitch option. There's just infinite kind of opportunities there, but it's still a very basic, simple play that you see every team run.
Before we end this segment, we do have to talk about that 2011 game, one of my favorite Oregon-Stanford games, just because this year it was Oregon who was playing spoiler. Stanford undefeated to this point. They ended up having a fantastic year, to only taking the one loss, beating Oklahoma State, I believe in the Orange Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. But Oregon, y'all, were able to go into that game absolutely from start to finish, beat down the Cardinal. Final score 53-30. Darren Thomas, another big game, 155 yards and 3 touchdowns. LaMichael, 146 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. This was a domination. This was a big moment for Oregon, who had been fighting back all season to prove that they weren't going to be defined by the one loss to LSU they had early in the season. Unfortunately, another loss did come the next week, but this was a big game, and it was one that Oregon just looked dominant in from beginning to end.
Yeah, and it was a great day. A really fun day to be a starter down there. Our defense played awesome in that game. I remember one of their only real big highlights for Stanford was that tackle from Andrew Luck on DeWitt Stuckey after he had thrown a pick. DeWitt thought he had a house call, but sorry, DeWitt. Andrew Luck got their one highlight from that night. But we had a lot of really interesting things in that game plan. Again, that one was pretty simple, but we had a lot more screens to start out the game, which actually, going back and watching that film, we kind of sputtered a little bit early. Darren didn't. It felt like Darren wasn't very sure of himself. And then finally, once he got his stride, our offense was rolling, but not just our offense. Our special teams had some really big plays in that too, as we talked about with Jeff Palmer last season. And you can go back and check that episode on SoundCloud or YouTube or anywhere. Catch our Jeff Palmer interview in our Snap episode. But he talked a lot about getting that play drawn up for him in particular. And that was one of those special moments where, you get to pull one on the smart guy. You get to draw up a play in the dirt that looks kind of silly. It makes someone look kind of silly because they can't figure out exactly what Oregon was trying to do. Back in those days, it felt like those 2-point conversions were really, a huge part of the brand and the trademark of our offense.
Well, Nick, we've broken down so many games. We've broken down exactly what Oregon's going to need to do, what they're going to be facing this coming week. Ducks and Cardinals, they are going to play tomorrow. Of course, if you're listening to this the day we put it out, they're going to be playing tomorrow, 4:30, ABC. It's going to be a great ball game. But right now, we've got a guest, and we've got a great guest. Why don't you tell the people, who do we got coming on? We already mentioned the name, but give us a little intro for this guest.
Yeah, as we've already said, he was pivotal in that game against Stanford in 2010. He's a guy I've always wanted to bring on this show from the very moment I thought about it, because not everyone gets to really know the kicker, and everyone gets to talk smack about the kicker. And Rob's actually a personal friend of mine, and I remember those days as a player where you heard people say things about your kicker, and that lack of trust, particularly with Oregon fans, in key critical moments. And I just remember knowing that there wasn't a guy I had more faith in the football field to be able to block out everything completely and just execute what we'd practiced and what we'd been doing. But off the field, an even better guy, and someone that came up through the J school just like yourself. So I remember going through class and growing up with him in college, and I always thought he would be one of the best guests we could get on. And what a better time than on Stanford week.
Stanford week is the perfect week. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited for this one too. Rob Beard, people.
Rob, thank you for joining us. Former guest and friend of the show, Jeff Palmer, has already been on representing the specialist, but you're our first kicker. He gave us a really unique insight on what it's like to be someone that's getting recruited as a specialist. How did a multi-sport athlete from Fullerton, California find his way to Eugene as a kicker?
Yep. This is where the story begins, right? So from Fullerton, California, played, linebacker, running back, tight end, got a chance to kick, but in high school. And first, Oregon had recruited me my sophomore, beginning my junior year, and then they kind of fell off. And just in my highlight tapes, I always put in just the kicking film. And we had a great running back in high school, a guy named Derek Coleman. He played for the Seahawks for a bit and led the state in touchdowns. And he was just a machine, which obviously led to a lot of PATs, a lot of kickoffs. So in my highlight tape, I would just put me booting the ball between the uprights and then, walk down and start playing on the defensive side of the ball. But anyways, so tore my ACL my senior year, was recovering and pretty committed to going to a junior college, something staying local and figuring out a way to get to a D1 or D1 AA. But I'm getting out of physical therapy one day, and I remember I got the 541 number, shows up on my cell phone, pick it up. Oh, it's Rob Beard. Yeah, hey, this is Coach Osborne from University of Oregon. So start talking to Coach Oz, and basically he invites me to come check out the school, says they can help me get in to walk on, help me get, admissions going and everything. And my dad and I drove up to Eugene the following week. Right when I pulled into Oregon, I was like, wow, this is a special place. And then we got even closer to campus, and that's when I knew that this was the opportunity that I was waiting for. And so, I took the chance to walk on. Backer in JUCO anymore, just going to stick to the kicking grind and see what that's all about. And I think go on to the next questions, but yeah, that's really how it started.
Rob, you mentioned you came in as a walk-on. It's something that I think is personally so impressive, to be able to come in, not necessarily be guaranteed your spot, but then be able to go in and earn it. You did earn that scholarship eventually. And I'm curious, how was life kind of different for you before you earned it, and then afterwards, once you were a solidified member of this group, if you will?
Yeah. Well, the walk-on guys, we all were pretty close. Had a really good, Jeff Palmer. We walked on together as specialists. My roommate, Justin Hoffman, he was also a walk-on. Great group of guys. So we all had to adopt a little bit more of, just more effort. I don't know. It's not, no, I can't say effort. It's more, you definitely feel like you have a chip on your shoulder, right? You have something to prove. And being a walk-on, you have to show up early every day. We had a goal of being in the locker room, opening up the locker room first, sitting at the front of every meeting, going to classes and doing a good job in the classroom. So you kind of have that chip on your shoulder that you have something to prove. And, eventually when I did get the chance to get the scholarship, but that's a fun story to tell you. But when I got the chance to get the scholarship, I knew that now this is something I have to prove even more that they made the right decision. So I kind of even kicked into high gear from there, and, stuck to the fundamentals of what got me there, which was just work ethic, staying dedicated to my teammates, showing up early and being very, just pointed with my goals. So, which was all about becoming the starter and doing well in the classroom. So I would say it never really, the only way it changed is it heightened when I got the scholarship, because I realized that now I really am in a select group of guys, and I don't want to make my family disappointed. I don't want to make Coach Kelly, Coach Osborne, my teammates, don't want to disappoint them. So
that's awesome. In 2009, we were both freshmen. It was my first start, and we were down at UCLA, and they brought you on for a 51-yard field goal. And that was your first big field goal kick as a Duck. And as you'd know it, I missed my assignment. Guy got through my gap, blocked your kick. Sorry again. I know I've apologized a million times. Even though it was blocked, though, how did it feel knowing early on the coaches trusted you in such a big moment, especially in a game where we had a lot of backups playing, and it was a tight game?
Yeah. I remember warming up before that game, and before the game had started, in the Rose Bowl. It's one of the most famous stadiums, and being closer to home too. I had family and friends that showed up at the game, and I just had a little extra adrenaline. So in warmups, I remember just absolutely crushing the ball. And Coach Osborne, he came over, he didn't say anything, but he was just watching me kick, 50, 55. I backed up pretty far. And I think he realized that I was on that day, and he must have told Coach Kelly, like, hey, Beard's making some connections, and had that chance, obviously. And I was, I'll never forget. I mean, being my first field goal opportunity, I was very excited, and I was still a walk-on at that point too, which is, kind of another piece of the whole, mind game. But I don't think it affected me that much. What I remember most, I guess, looking back on that, is the sound of the ball off of my foot and the feeling that I knew I had, struck it clean. But it's literally like the sound of, a baseball bat right after that. It was like boom, boom, which I think was either your tailbone or your back plate. I don't know what it was, but I mean, I wasn't mad at you or anything, like it was, they had some beast guys there, and I think that they did a good job at blocking the kick, but thankfully I had more opportunities after that.
Throughout your career, Rob, you had a lot of really big opportunities. Coaches trusted you in a lot of really big moments. One of the first ones that comes to my mind, and I think to most Duck fan minds, is that Stanford game, 2010. They send you out there. The score is 21-10 at the time. The momentum needs to shift a little bit. The quote that I've always heard, and it was a great quote from Coach Kelly, was to get yourself from out of a hole that you've been digging yourself, the first thing you have to do is stop digging. That stop digging came on a play. It was an onside kick call. Walk us through that play a little bit, the huddle beforehand, practicing it throughout the week. And what was that moment like when that moment you were able to grab the ball?
Yeah, that is one of my better memories of being in games. So it's fun to talk about that. I mean, honestly, leading up to that week, that Stanford week, being with Coach Rad and the other specialists, we would always try to do different type of onside kicks. And I had started practicing something kind of similar to what we had done. And honestly, Coach Rad must have said something to Coach Osborne, because that Monday, leading into, Osborne comes up and he's like, hey, I want you to, try this onside kick. So I remember the first try was pretty good. Second try was pretty good. And he's like, okay, we're going to do this in kickoff period. I was like, okay. And we did it, I think, definitely a few times live with the whole kickoff group in practice. And just about every time it was me dribbling the ball over to, I think it was Avery Patterson. He was the R1. So you got the R1, R2, R3, R4, R5. And those are each number of guys, to the right of the kicker. And the idea was that we knew that the Stanford kickoff return tackle would leave early every time. So the idea was I would kick it straight at him. He'd be out of position. The R3 or R2 would, take him, and then Avery would pick up the ball. So that was how it was practiced. And then, game time comes around. It's obviously different. And I remember I had field goal leading up to it. I think, we had scored a touchdown. And I knew we were thinking about doing it. I didn't know we were doing it right then and there. But Osborne I remember he looks at me, hey, we're going for it. And I was excited, but I knew that we had practiced perfectly and executed perfectly throughout the week. And I wasn't nervous at all. And, approached the ball just like I would, disguised it. Sure enough, the tackle left early and just dribbled it right over to him. But that tackle on the kickoff return, he was an athlete. So he put his foot in the ground and he must have made a move to the ball. And I think my teammate Boseko Lacumbo had maybe knocked him out, or Dion Jordan did. And Avery even, had to jump in there too to take somebody, make sure they didn't get the ball. And I just followed it, saw an opportunity to jump on it. And I took that opportunity, and it was really cool. Just immediately I knew that, something special happened. The crowd, the teammates, John Boyette, I remember running up to me, how excited he was. And I guess I didn't realize how important or impactful it was, looking back on the game. I'm glad we came out on top. I think the whole team played amazing that game. Michael, I remember, played phenomenal, and offensive line played great. But it was basically it, preparation to execution in the game.
That's one of my favorite highlights of yours too, because not only did you get the ball, but you beat Dion Jordan and Michael Clay to get there too. I mean, there you go. Like that's a good one to have on the resume. Another highlight that I really remember in our careers that was fun is the next year down at Stanford. Take us back through, if you remember, Coach Kelly had a halftime speech that definitely helped us turn the tables, some might say. Where were you at, and what do you remember?
Oh man, not gonna lie, when you're in the moments like that where games are tight, and as a specialist, you honestly try to tune it out. So I honestly, Nick, as disappointing it probably is to you, I had realized that was going to be a tough one for us. And that specific game, I was, coming back from an injury. I don't quite remember what Chip had said exactly, but I was mentally preparing myself to be called on, because I think at that point I was just getting back from my injury, hoping to get a shot at taking the game-winning kick, or being in a position to help the team. So I was mentally preparing for that moment. Unfortunately, I didn't get it.
So to get your memory jogged while you were tuning us out, Coach Kelly, this is the one where Coach Kelly came in and basically didn't say anything but flipped the table over and said, "Let's finish this game and get the hell out of here." So
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Keep in mind that, us specialists, we would, we'd come in, we try to get warm because we're standing there on the sideline, and then we would always take off early just to get our reps in, get some action before, the game started again. But I do remember that now. Yeah, he had a fun way of interesting way of making things exciting in the locker room. A lot of respect for him, though.
Ross, speaking of making things exciting, your entire career highlight tape is one of the more fun things that I've been able to go through lately. Just seeing all the different types of plays that would be drawn up, whether it was a 2-point conversion, onside kicks, fourth down plays, just all of the above. If you had to pick just one of these highlights on the field to represent your game, to represent your time in Eugene, what do you think that play would be and why?
Oh man. That's, you know what? Honestly, I think it was my first kickoff ever. So I redshirted my first year. The next year we went to Boise, the famous Boise game with our friends LeGarrette. That game it was tough, obviously, being an Oregon fan, being an Oregon player. For the coaches, very tough. Why I guess I'm talking about this, my first kickoff is that was it Doug? It must have been, I think it was Doug Martin. It was someone really good back there, but I kicked off the ball and he made some moves. Sure, it was the blue jerseys on blue field, but I had to make, a tackle, and ended up being the last line of defense, made a tackle. And I think in that moment, I think the coaches, the guys on the kickoff team realized that, I'm probably not just the kicker. And then so my second kickoff in that game, same thing. I made this tackle again. And then my third kickoff, it was me and another teammate. We did, assisted tackle to get together. So that game was kind of, I think, the starting point to, hey, Rob can do something than just swing his leg. And I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's what opened up the door for those 2-point conversions and, the other fun things I got to do. And yeah, it definitely comes to mind as being the kind of catalyst, in my Duck career.
So beyond just, what you did on the field on game days, I wanted you on the podcast, not just because you're a great teammate and friend, because you have a great personality and some great stories. One of my favorite ones from practice is when the entire offensive and defensive lines almost had to stop because of something you did with your elbow in a tackling drill. Could you walk us through that story?
Oh yeah. Yep. So, Coach Rad always making things interesting for us. He was a great coach to be with, and we would do tackling drills. We'd do other, just things to keep us, athletes and fresh. But we were doing one of the sleds, and I have this double jointed elbow. You can't really kind of see it in my sleeve, but anyways, Morgan Flint, he's like, Rob, do your elbow thing, like after you make the tackle. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea. Be a funny joke. So yeah, I ended up hitting the sled, falling over, holding my elbow like I popped it out. Coach Rad just screams, trainers! And he takes off running, and then all of us specialists just start busting up laughing, good joke. And immediately he looks back and he just puts his hands on his knees, laughs to himself. And I run over and tell him, sorry, Coach, just a joke. So I think obviously got, the Trenchmen and all of your attention there. And hopefully you guys got a good laugh out of it too.
We did. We definitely did.
Yeah.
Rob, I asked Nick before we got on, actually when we were recording the last segment, I said, Nick, what is something that Rob might have to share that's not just football? What else is there about Rob that I think that could be applicable? And he looks at me and he goes, Sam, he was a J student. You're a J student. That's worth talking about. Talk about it. And so I'm just curious, as a former UOSOJCer, what advice do you have about getting through those programs? And what can you tell me a little bit about from your time as a J student at the University of Oregon?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that I think the biggest thing is just connections and the network you build, your classmates, your professors, Deb Morrison, and just everyone involved. Like, you have to get out there and be vulnerable, ask people questions, speak up in class, no question is a bad question. So that's my biggest advice. Just be vulnerable, get your name out there. You're building your personal brand, and you learn a lot about that in the advertising school. It's just all about branding and in some instances, marketing too. But yeah, that's my advice. My experience going through it was awesome. Shared it with a few teammates. Nick and we had some classes together, and we got to have some fun projects. I think what I realized towards the end of the whole experience was how just creative you can be. And I loved the opportunity to put my creativity to work, whether it was developing an ad campaign or putting a documentary about surfing in the Northwest. Just awesome opportunities to be creative, and that's really what gravitated me most towards it. That last ad campaigns class, we had to make a campaign for Hoodoo Ski Resort, and I'm a big snowboarder, love snowboarding, and that one really resonated with me. I was very excited for that, and came up with the tagline, "Who do you ride with?" They didn't pick us. They said that was probably catered more towards the younger crowds, the college students, where they were really looking to cater to families. But yeah, I mean, coming out from that, I learned how important it is to have a solid, network, how to be, you want to be connected to your teammates, people, during school and even after school. And then just overall communication skills, going through spelling and grammar classes like that, that's so applicable in any profession. So yeah, I would just say just pay attention to how you communicate to others and treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, I was telling Sam specifically, I remember it was an early J school class when we were freshmen and you were still undecided on a major. And I remember that moment, the light went off and I could see it in your eyes and you were like, hey, we didn't take school all that seriously until that. And you were like, I think I could do this, man. And I just wanted to know, from then to where you are today, how have you been able to transition that enthusiasm to what you do now?
Yeah. I mean, I work for an IT services company, right? And a lot of it has to do with how do I communicate what we can do and how we do it better, right? So communication is a key piece to what I'm doing, and it's part project coordination, it's part recruiting. I have to recruit a lot of people into these projects. I manage a smaller team, so communicating with them and being creative on solving some of the problems that we're trying to solve for our customers, that's another key piece. But I think there's just a high need and desire to think outside the box. And that's, I think, something that J school teaches you is how to think outside the box, writing storyboards on coming up with an ad campaign. It's the same kind of different ways how many different routes can I go to get to the same, end place or that final destination. So I think it's really applicable. I mean, although I'm not, I didn't learn a whole lot about IT in college, but, having the experience of having to learn on the fly, go through courses and, just go through college in general, you learn how to adapt and how to pick up different skills. So that's, yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
I think it definitely makes sense, Rob. You're a family man now. You're a busy guy. You've talked about your work. Congratulations again on the second kid on the way. It's incredibly special stuff. But in all of your experiences and time, have you found the time to be able to come back to Eugene, come back to Oregon, revisit either the program or just the city that you spent so much time in?
I love that question because, Eugene has a special place in my heart. It's first place, I moved to outside of Fullerton, California. So I take every opportunity to go back, and it's amazing just to see its growth and its national attention. As a kid, like my parents never moved me anywhere. I grew up in the same house. Never really thought or realized like I'd be leaving, and just the people in Eugene, the culture, what the university had to offer, it made that transition so easy. So it stays so close to me, and just my heart in general. So yeah, I mean, when my daughter was born, when she was 3 months old, I took her down, 4 months old, took her down to her first game. I want to take her down to a game every year. She's already saying "Go Ducks." I think she's even wearing an Oregon shirt right now. But every time we're down in that area, I always make an effort to stop over by Autzen. We usually park over by that dog park, and we go for a walk and go down to the Willamette, just check out the river. My wife and I, we met in Eugene. So it's, just talking about, remember that time we got chicken bones and we brought them down to the river and we, hung out and just, went swimming, or remember the time, it's just stuff like that. So I make every effort as possible to get down there. And we've been doing more road trips lately, back home to see my family. I've actually already done 2 this year. Now with the pandemic and everything, we've been able to work from home and be more mobile. So both times on each drive, we stopped there, hung out for a couple hours, and just rehashed like old times. So I as my girls grow, I want to take them down there as much as possible. I think the people of Eugene and the university and just everything the green and yellow has to offer is what I want them to feel and see in their childhood.
Oh man, that's amazing to hear. Well, we've got one more question for you. It's not so much a question as it is a tradition, but when we bring our special teamers on, as Jeff Palmer has already taught us, we have this tradition we got to keep, and we have it in the form of a question. Special teams,
be special.
I love
that's
it.
A good one.
Thank you for coming on with us, Rob. We hope you enjoy this 2020 season, and thanks for coming and talking those great moments in Stanford with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see what we can do this weekend. I think Coach Cristobal, he's on the verge of something really special. So hopefully he sticks around for a long time, and who knows, maybe they'll name a building after him or make a statue or something. But thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate your time, Nick. Sam, nice to meet you. You guys, best of luck with everything.
Thanks, man. Go Ducks.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Go Ducks.
Nick, that was so much fun to be able to hear from Rob, be able to hear some of the stories of the way back when, and then also have him be able to update us now on what he's got going on in life.
Well, you got to trust me, Sam. When I pitch these guests to you, I'm only bringing on the heavy hitters, man. The guys I know that I played with, they're going to be good guests, even if they are kickers. So if I start suggesting more specialists, you can't turn me down.
Oh, I never have, and I never will. Specialists are always the most fun. They always do a good job. They always are special.
Absolutely. Already go back and check our episode with Jeff Palmer for a little bit more of that background info there on what it's like being a specialist. I know Rob gave a great detail there, but episode number 3, go back with Jeff Palmer, and we're going to keep that tradition going for at least once every season. We're bringing a specialist in. But going back to the Stanford game, we've talked about it a lot, and it's coming up tomorrow, Sam. What's your prediction for the game? What do you see happening? What's the final score going to be?
Oh, Nick, I really didn't want to go first. This is a tricky one for me. It's going to be the first game of the season. Oregon's defense has been impressive throughout training camp. I think anybody who's been reading up knows that. The offense is coming along as well. It's a new system, though. Brand new offensive line, new man behind center. It's going to be difficult. I really think that Oregon might struggle to score, at least in the first half. And I think that it's going to end up being a little bit maybe more low scoring of a game than people expect. I think this Oregon defense will be absolutely ferocious. I think that they're going to be, especially the front seven, it's just going to be out of this world. I expect Oregon to be able to hold Stanford to 14 to 17 points, but honestly, I don't know if the Oregon offense, at least this week, is going to be able to surpass 30. So with that in mind, I'm going to make my official prediction: Oregon 27, Stanford 17. Oregon gets a 10-point victory on national television. It's a decent first step, and they're able to take that energy up north to Washington State.
Well, Sam, I like your prediction, but I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you. I think that from what I've seen in college football this year, the score is bound to be higher than we expect. I'm going to bet the over. I'm going to even go ahead and pull back my scholar baller card, do a little bit of math, and say that Oregon is going to score 4 touchdowns on offense and at least 1 special teams or defensive touchdown in this game. So I've got the final score going down 35-21 Ducks.
Well, Nick, we've got our predictions in. We have an interview under our belt. We spoke for an hour before this. I don't really know what more there is to do besides tell everybody, please like, share, subscribe, all of the above. Follow everywhere at OnceADuck, and we're going to have plenty more coming throughout the season.
Yeah, definitely. This is our longest episode, but we want you guys to tailgate with us this season. So that's why we're going to keep just making them as long as our guests and our conversations go. So we're going to be there with you this whole season, try and release the day before every single game. And we're really excited for tomorrow. And we hope to hear your feedback on Twitter, in the comments and the replies. Like Sam said, like and subscribe at OnceADuck, or look up OnceADuck anywhere you can get a podcast. We are now just updated to be on Amazon Music. We've been approved to be on there as our podcast. So thank you very much, Amazon, and thank you to everyone who's listened. Brought our first real YouTube video up to over 200 views in less than 3 days. I mean, this is just way better than we expected. We love the new format. Hope you do too. And as always, we're taking your suggestions on Twitter because, once a duck, always a duck. We're here for you, and we can't wait to talk Duck football and get into this 2020 season and have actual new football to talk about next week.
Folks, we're going to be excited to bring it to you next week. We've got a guest that you guys are going to really enjoy. It's going to be a fun one. Nick, why don't you take us out?
Once a duck, always a duck, baby. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great night.